Hello everybody, good afternoon, welcome back to the Spacebook channel, welcome back to Type 40, and we're live, hello, this afternoon, after a hell of a week in Doctor Who fandom. I don't know if you've come down from it all yet. I'm not sure that I have, still processing some of it, and still hearing things too. But we'll talk a little bit about that today, but it's mostly a nostalgia fest, going back 15 years. Hope you're on board for that. We want your comments. As usual, when we record these Type 40 Club, this is our kind of Type 40 book club for episodes of Doctor Who, a story club, a video club, whatever you want to call it. So we have an episode of the week, of the time, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to do a big deep dive on that. We've all had a rewatch of it, and we're going to share our thoughts. There are a few of us that are going to gather around the table in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to check in with you guys and explain what's going on. Because we are live streaming live to YouTube and Facebook, so whichever platform you're on, remember, if you are on Facebook, you have to let StreamYard know that you're there. Tell StreamYard who you are, and StreamYard will tell us. And if you drop us a comment, I can put your name on screen too, rather than just Facebook user, because that always feels a little bit impersonal. And we like to get personal in the nicest possible way here on Type 40. So my mates are coming on in a moment, but we want your comments, your memories about the Unquiet Dead, the episode from 2005, and you can talk about the episode as was then. Maybe memories that you have of watching it at the time, or if you've rewatched it later and you think it stands up really well, or maybe it's aged a little more than you thought. Whatever, bring us that too. And in light of the fact of that incredible news on Friday, wherever it goes, wherever that goes by 2023 or 2024, it's still incredible news. So yes, we're going to talk about everything in light of that too, and pick up what we can about these episodes as the future beckons and things brighten up a little bit. I wish it was a little bit brighter out there. Proper autumn day here in Great Britain today. Let's have a quick look and see who's here. Got a few of the regulars. Hello all. Hello, Enigmatic Joker. Good to see you there. And Jonathan Cox is here. He's at work. Don't tell you. Okay, I'll keep my voice down as best I can. We are safe for work most of the time. It depends where you work, really, doesn't it? I am. Anon says, I am the first to be critical, and I am quite vocal of my dislike of Who. But where I looked back at Doctor Who Confidential, and I have to say it was really full of infectious fun and enthusiasm. Yes, well, it's a puff piece, wasn't it? But it was done really, really well. Confidential. I missed Confidential when they stopped it, and when they tried to start it up again as Doctor Who Extra, it didn't quite cut the mustard, did it? It was even fluffier, even less substantial. There was something about those early series of Confidential. Maybe we'll do a whole episode about that one day. Thanks for being here, Anon. And we've got the memories coming too. Good afternoon from my time zone. The Newport TARDIS. The Welsh contingent are here in force. Good to see. And lots of people saying hello. And we got the ahoy in early from Crimpling to Balloon. Good to see you. Hope you've all got a drink on the go like I have. Yeah. Usual weather reports and talk about whatever we're eating or drinking, as always, here on Type 40 and the Spacebook. The Darren Zone. Hail and greetings down and safe and in the chat. Somebody's been watching Blake 7, haven't they? Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for everybody for being here. We're going to get started now. We're going to get started proper with my silly introduction. Put my radio voice on for you. And we'll get into it. Yeah, I've got a couple of people to bring on, and we're going to see if we can spook one another out talking about this classic from 2005. So this is the bit where is it? This is the bit where I do this. It's time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network, with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, and your designated driver. Now, it could be you're new to the show. Nice to have you aboard. Mind the interdimensional rift. But if you've been here before, you know the drill by now. We're the same irreverent, non-gatekeeping, eclectic show for everybody, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to the adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We talk about it all on this show. All opinions are encouraged and heard, and there may even be a laugh or two along the way. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. Yes, welcome back to the show, everybody, for another one of our deep dive review shows, Type 40 Club, as we've badged it. Can't wait to get started on this one, in particular in light of the fact that so much has changed since the last time we recorded one of these. Where's it going to go? What's going to happen? Are there many clues to the future in the past? And that's where we're going. We're going to the past 2 or 3 times over with this particular edition of the show to talk about an episode from 2005. Following on from our reviews of both Rose and The End of the World, it seemed only fitting to round that off with that third episode, the one that kind of sealed the deal, that ticked another one of Doctor Who's very particular boxes when it came to bringing the show back to the mainstream back in 2005 for Series 1, those really exciting heady days in the spring of 2005. And here to discuss it with me, well, it's a problem. There's nobody here at the moment. So I'm going to have to make contact. I've got my glass here, and I'm going to place that down on the disc, and sort of my finger on the top. That's how you do it, isn't it? And say, is there anybody there? And see if I can reach anybody from the other side, ideally. Could be another dimension altogether, wherever the unknown lies, or it could more likely be in Battersea in London. For a chat with my mate, the Mega Geek, Ian Davies. Cheers.
Hello.
Hello, my friend. Did you like that?
yeah, especially. Oh, yeah. So how are you doing then? All right?
I'm good, thank you. It's been the last time we spoke in our time stream. We can't speak for you guys out there listening or watching. The last time we spoke, we were really sort of het up with all the news, and it was a really intense 48 hours, wasn't it? And so it's good to kind of cleanse the palate and maybe sort of reset our expectations by connecting with a proper chunk of Doctor Who, and to pick our way through the script and what's on screen.
Absolutely.
the way that you like to go forensic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting news this week, wasn't it? About Russell T and what's going on, but there's reservations. A lot of people think that it's just it's fool's gold. A lot of people think it's fool's gold, So, but I'm a bit hopeful, but I stand in the middle. I don't know what to expect, or we can only speculate from this point on.
Yeah, Don't hear that expression so often now, fool's gold, but it is appropriate.
I'm old.
Fitting, and I do see where we're coming from. Well, we are streaming this edition of the show. This is something we started doing a little recently. So we are streaming this edition of the show live onto Facebook and to YouTube. So there are people watching live, say hello, and at various junctions in the show, we'll be checking in with them for their memories about this particular episode too, their memories about the show at the time, or maybe in the multiple rewatches they've had since, where you sit with it now, watching or listening out there. Get in touch. Let us know what you think. We're genuinely interested. And yet, in light of the news too, has it stimulated further thought from you? Of course, we do our level best, don't we, to do as much proper thinking as we can. But we've been designated an official who comes in and checks our thinking.
That's right.
And make sure that we're sort of we're on target, really. So we've got our official from the Department of Wendology. Stand by your beds, everybody. It's Wendy Powers.
Hello.
Hello, Wendy. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on again. Yeah, it's I'm going to have to get a proper sort of uniform from the Department of Wendology. I think I'm going to have to get this sorted. Yeah, I have my clipboard, my pocket protector. I'm going to need it all.
I was wondering. I was trying to think what the word was for those things that the
pocket protector. Yeah,
very American pocket protector.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're going to be official. So yes, since this is the first time that we've had a chance to speak to you about it, Wendy, let's. I was wondering what you were thinking, where you were at as regards the return of the legendary Doctor Who figure Russell T Davies, who brought the show back to the TV so successfully in 2005. It was the very reason why we started this particular strand of reviews on Type 40. So where were you when you heard the news, and what were your initial reactions?
Where was I? I can't even think at the moment. I was I can remember I was actually on Twitter at that moment, and I happened to start to see these tweets coming through, and I saw one that looked an awful lot like the official Doctor Who Twitter account. And it turned out to be a similar account, and I thought, it must just be a spoof, because you think, oh no, it's never going to happen. Russell himself had turned down, a chance to come back again, and I thought, no, that can't be right. And then I thought, okay, well, let's just check the official Doctor Who Twitter page, and there it was. My first reaction was yay. I love Russell, and I felt like we'd been given an early Christmas. It was a little bit of a shock, because it was almost like, is this real? Maybe I'm still dreaming. Maybe I'm just going to suddenly wake up in bed and I'm going to have dreamt the whole thing. But yeah, so after the initial happiness and joy, of seeing that, I'm very conscious of the fact for myself, as well as my husband and so many of us who've been around for a while and who've loved Doctor Who since we were youngsters, and have been through many storms and many ups and downs with it. That there was a little something still sort of holding me back and saying, you know what, this is wonderful. This is wonderful news, but let's keep our feet firmly on the ground and say, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I think it's going to be in the best hands it's been since Russell first brought it back in 2005. What's going to happen when he brings it back, not only for the 60th, but I'm assuming that they will make good on that comment and say that it's coming back for at least a series with Russell at the helm and Bad Wolf. But
it's important as well, isn't it, to temper our expectations in light of the fact that this is a long time. It's going to be 2 years until we get to see that 60th anniversary special from the time we're recording this. And the best part of 2.5 years until a series materializes. So we've got a few, we're going to go to bed and get up a few times in between now and then, and life goes on and popular culture moves on. And this is maybe a peek into a general future for the entire Doctor Who brand and for broadcasting too, Ian. I mean, it's I won't sort of big it up too much, because it's not as if the Doctor Who brand is making any great innovations in doing this. There's a strong argument to say that it probably should have gone to an independent production company 3 or 4 years ago, isn't there? Which better late than never, Ian.
It is, but as I said, when I first heard, just like Wendy, when I first heard the news, I thought, oh great, he's gonna take over. And then when you think about it very carefully, you think, well, what does that mean? See, that's the question. What does it mean? So, I mean, you can only speculate. One speculation is that the BBC is so desperate and so wanted to have the fans back that the only way they could do that is go back to the original source, which was Russell. That's one bit of speculation, and then there's another question after that. If he does take over, because it's obvious that this era of Doctor Who failed miserably. What is he going to do? Is he going to cast a woman? Is it going to be a man Doctor? Is it going to be? Is he going to still follow the canon that? No, I'm not calling it canon. I'm calling it disaster. That Chibs Chibs created. Is he going to retcon the retcon? And then you know, and the question goes on and on and on, you know, but for us as fans, it's horrible because fans shouldn't be feeling like this. We should be arguing about each episode not working, or we didn't like this so and so, whatever. Like the old days, we
Rather
shouldn't
than
be
the
arguing.
politics and the production around the
Exactly.
show. Yeah.
Exactly. We shouldn't be arguing over the politics and the ridiculousness of the last era. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, we'll see.
I think it's important that we remember that as well, that there is always more to every story, because you know, for as much as we feast on all of this, and this is no matter where you sit on the kind of material that Doctor Who has pumped out over the last 3 or 4 years, we still only get told exactly what they want us to know.
Yep.
No more and no less, and worded precisely. Never forget that every press release that comes from, and this isn't just the BBC, from every studio, every single word is carefully thought about. It's planted. They never tell you any more or any less than they can legally afford to, and they have an entire department of legal people and a publicity department too. So whilst we can project and speculate and even come up with our own fantasy version of how we want the show to look, that's perfectly natural. That's what fans do, and that's so much fun. We should never stop doing that. But my advice, the boring advice, is to temper your expectations and ride out the next few months, which are going to be pretty hard. I know, but ride out the next few months. Enjoy 2022 and enjoy the speculation here with us on Type 40, because we're going to be there every step of the way. Over in the chat, watching on YouTube, we've got Alex Storer. Alex is one of the minds and the mouse behind Blackpool Remembered and Blackpool Revisited, the two incredible ebooks. And he's dropped in a comment on this very topic. Mixed feelings on Russell T Davies, says Alex. Feels like the show has been sent back to the repair shop. But it's not going to be 2005 again either. No, of course it isn't.
True.
Russell T Davies has his creative legacy has expanded so much since then. TV's changed a lot since then, and the man's been through so much in his personal life too. So I honestly have no idea what he's going to do. The only thing I can guarantee is that focus will be back on character and story. That's not to say there won't be other elements in there, and that won't mean that doesn't mean that his personal peccadillos won't be visible, won't be audible. But Russell T Davies is Britain's greatest living screenwriter.
I know, but it's funny though, because see how times have changed. You know, it's like you used to watch Naked Gun. Yeah. When the main character had the bullhorn, it'll say nothing to see here, and there's explosions behind him and stuff like that. This is like the BBC. The BBC are going, you know, we're a success. You know, Doctor Who's being a success. Everybody, yes, we should all cheer. And in the background, everything's falling apart and stuff. It's so obvious to everyone that this era did not work at all, right? And I just can't believe that this is where we've gone now as a society, as a broadcaster, where we're live for our teeth. And it's so obvious to everybody that it didn't work. It's ridiculous, don't you think?
We've got several new people new to the show watching us stream to YouTube and Facebook today, and one of whom is our new friend here, Jester of Roanoke. Roanoke, is that what it is? And anyway, the Jester says, I think Russell T Davies might actually bring in Michael Sheen, but we'll have him portrayed much in the same way as his performance in Good Omens.
Maybe.
So I think he means sort of fey and fussy, but strong when needed. I don't know. I think that the fact that the show, through Bad Wolf, has effectively stepped onto the international stage again, they can feasibly get somebody like Michael Sheen. I can see Michael Sheen, if it wasn't for the fact he was committed to Good Omens, season 2 of that, I could see him commit to a show of the sort of scale we're looking at now. I think I think it was impossible 2 weeks ago. Now it's a possibility. Mm-hmm. Is it a probability? Yeah, you know. If I was Russell T Davies, would I go with Michael Sheen? I probably wouldn't. I'd go with I'd go with somebody much younger, somebody
Yes.
unknown. We'll have to see. Where that goes. But Wendy, we've all got our wish lists, haven't we? The things that we wish for the character and the show. Have you got one that you'd like to share with us? One little thing that you'd like to see either brought back or something of influential from elsewhere in geek culture, or from literature, or from movies, or whatever else that you'd like to see. What should they be looking at as a touchstone, as a brand new touchstone for all new Doctor Who?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I can only, off the top of my head at the moment, I can only say that having watched some of Russell's 2005 era now again, there's a cinematic feel to those stories and there's a magic, for lack of a better term, and I know it's not a very technical term, but there's a magic to how those stories leave you feeling and how easily you're swept away by those stories. So I think we definitely need a return to story over everything else, really. I mean, a really good story that's well produced and looks good on screen, but that has that real cinematic flavor that Russell gave it, in that very first run.
Watching each episode left you with this sort of afterglow, didn't it? It left you tingling, anticipating the next one, but sort of very satisfied and ready to enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening too. It was potent and it was powerful, and it meant so much to so many people.
It certainly did, and it meant the absolute world to myself and to my husband Darren, and it meant something very special to both of us, and I do miss those days, and I'm not saying I'm not foolish enough to think that this is going to be 2005 all over again. All fairy tales and sparkles. It's not. We're in a totally different place in the entire world, where Russell, bless his heart, has been through so much. Yet he still managed to put out and produce these these amazing programs that still showcase the depth of his talents and his ability to really tell a fantastic story and to cast well.
And to gather around him the cream of writing talent. He had a great eye for writers, both established writers and people who were sort of just starting out on their journey, really, and to give them a shot on Doctor Who and to work intensively with them on the show. And it's one such episode we're going to be talking about for the bulk of this edition of Type 40 this time. None of these reviews, this is the disclaimer, we're well aware that none of these reviews that we casually go through here on this show are the first word on these adventures. Far, far from it. And they're not intended as definitive statements or judgments on them either. This is not a last word. This is just the latest word. And these are our feelings as we sort of connect, join the dots, and recount some of the cream, really, of Doctor Who from back in 2005 in this case. And before we get into that, it's only fair that I remind you that if you want to do some real-time travelling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is available. Yes, it's out there, Ian, on the device of your choice. If you know where to look, you can stream or download us at type40.podbean.com. That's the official home of the Type 40 podcast there, our dedicated feed, or we're across all the other podcatchers. There'll be some more about all of that a little later on, as well as when we make contact with the matrix of all knowledge, and that's our kith and kin on the Fandom Podcast Network, loaded up with all those other genre podcasts to fill your ears with on a daily basis. Now, that's all taken care of. We can get stuck in, and I can hit this. So here we are, getting stuck in with episode 3 of Series 1 of Doctor Who. Back in 2005, this was how it went. Doctor Who was back, and already beginning to cast a spell, just as Wendy described so beautifully there, really, on the 21st century viewing public. There'd been two really breathless escapades from the pen, from the Mac. Pen sounds really old-fashioned. That sounds Victorian in itself, doesn't it? From the Mac of Russell T Davies. And for the third week of Series 1, we got the first story from somebody else, albeit to the showrunner's blueprint. Russell T Davies did issue all the writers loose but firm ideas about what he wanted. And I think that Mark Gatiss, who wrote The Unquiet Dead, was possibly the nearest candidate for a sure thing that you could possibly imagine for joining the squad for Series 1. It was a surprise to no one to see him there, and neither was the tone or the function of his first contribution. If anybody was guaranteed to set a new generation of kids dashing behind the sofa, it was probably Mark Gatiss, and this is effectively Doctor Who's stab at a zombie episode, isn't it? So it's The Unquiet Dead, first broadcast on the 9th of April 2005, and we've got a general synopsis here. The Doctor takes Rose back through time to 1869, but in Victorian Cardiff the dead are walking and creatures made of gas are on the loose. The time travellers team up with Charles Dickens to investigate Mr. Sneed, the local undertaker. But can they halt the plans of the ethereal Gelth? There you go. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, so if you haven't seen it for a while, that's the general lay of the land. This, as with all of Series 1, stars the mighty Christopher Eccleston, making a huge impact, even by this point, as the solemn figure of the Ninth Doctor, along with Billy Piper as Rose Tyler, and a cast who I'm sure we'll get round to in a couple of minutes. So, yeah, Ian, this episode, did you, watching it, I know you've rewatched it too, so watching it again this time, how long had it been since you'd seen it? And do you remember watching it the first time? And what sort of feelings had it left you with then?
I do remember watching it the first time, and I have rewatched it, and this is one of the good ones of Chris's run, and I really liked this episode because it was very much Doctor Who, wasn't it? Let's face it. I mean, that what is it, 18th century kind of stuff. That always creep into Doctor Who. If I was in charge, if I was a showrunner, I'd never have an 18th century thing, because I think that's been done to death. And plus, they can go into the BBC's wardrobe and get all those costumes out. Do you know what I mean? They must have thousands of costumes. Whatever. The thing I wondered about. And you probably know more than me, Dan. When I watched it, the first time I watched it, and the second time I watched it, I wondered the same thing. Smeed, right? Yes. Is he based on the character in Peter Pan? Because he does have the thing, the character Smeed in Peter Pan. He has the sideburn.
Yes, he's Captain Hook's sort of henchman, isn't it?
Yeah. No, not henchman, but sidekick, basically. But I was just thinking, do they call him Smeed because, and they actually gave him the sideburns as well, like the character in Peter Pan. So I was just wondering whether there was a connection there, but I don't know.
I don't think so. I think he's more of a. I think he is more a standard. I mean, this entire episode really, it's how can I put this? You don't have to be Barry Norman to track and trace where everything is feeding into this. Whether you're talking about the Romero zombie movies or Hammer horror or any of those, Sherlock Holmes, it is all in there and so blatantly. And I think that all of the characters, and this isn't meant as any slight on it at all, Wendy, they are all, I don't want to use the word cliches, but they're all standards, aren't they? This is the kind of Mr. Micawber figure, I think, that we get in Mr. Sneed. He's a typical Dickensian figure.
Yes. Also, the Doctor was the Doctor in this, more so than the other two episodes, in my opinion. I don't know what you thought, Wendy.
I agree, and I quite liked Eccleston's Doctor in this. He felt more damaged. He felt more. I mean, even in his attempts at humor, didn't feel awkward because it felt like the Doctor had been damaged. He was he'd been through so much that he was still sort of trying to sort of fit into. He was trying to sort of communicate with Rose, but he was also still very angry and still full of a lot of rage and darkness as well.
You can tell by some of the comments he makes, like when Dickens tried to get up from the seance, or tried to get up and try to get out. He tells him to shut up or something like that, or get out, whatever. But then he apologizes to him, doesn't he? I'm really sorry that I said that to you, doesn't he? Which is a really nice balance there.
The character comes across, as we've started with the Doctor, the character does come across, as you said, Wendy, as being very, very tormented. The survivor's guilt, doing what he can to save lives. He couldn't save all those lives, billions of lives, trillions probably during the Time War. And here he is kind of effectively fighting small fires and making decisions which to him are probably quite small compared to the ones that he had to make during the Time War and the run up to the Time War. But to somebody like Rose, decisions and moral dilemmas that simply blow her mind, as they would blow all of our minds.
Yes, and he obviously had been able to keep his sense of humor intact through a lot of his previous adventures, because that was the one thing that I always loved about like Tom's Doctor and all of the Doctors in some form or fashion always had a little, with the except, Hartnell was a very serious Doctor, but the others had a little twinkle in their eye. They still had that inner child was still running free within them. And Eccleston, was the first time that, I can remember feeling that the Doctor he was really in a bad way. He'd been damaged, and yet he was still out there trying to fight for humanity and wanted to be there and help. But as Dan said, he was only fighting small fires now, and to him, they were just so... They were nothing. They were so easy to sort of try and sort out that
redemption,
even he,
isn't it?
Redemption, exactly. But even he sort of rushes to judgment with Gwyneth, doesn't he?
He does.
He assumes that that's going to solve the problem. But then Rose is trying to tell him, well, wait a second now. She's a human being with her own rights. But of course, Gwyneth thinks that she's doing right as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really did like this episode. I like the idea that they try to scare you, try to go back to the old 70s Doctor Who and try to scare you with the zombies. Well, we call them zombies, but they weren't really zombies. And also, I like the idea that the Doctor was the cleverest person in the room, always.
Yes.
Anywhere they went, he knew what was going on before anyone. Right, I like that because for me, that's always been the Doctor. The Doctor would walk in and he'll say blah, 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 and be like, how does he know that? Do you know what I mean? And that essentially to me is the Doctor. Also, I love the color palette, which is orange. Everywhere that picture is probably taken on the set, but they graded everything orange for some reason.
Yeah.
Everything was orange, which was quite cool, I guess. Yeah. It's quite cool.
I mean, looking back to what you were saying about Mr. Sneed there, I mean, this character to me reminds me of the kind of grotesques that we used to get on the show in the Hinchcliffe era back in the mid to late 70s. They're the kind of characters that Robert Holmes would have created. And it particularly reminds me of a character called Joe Bell in Colin Baker's story called Revelation of the Daleks.
Yeah.
But he's a softer version of that character. There's several dilemmas, several moral questions in this story. And just like all good Doctor Who, what it does, it puts them out there and explores them from either side, rather than offering us a definite statement about how we should feel. Sneed, for example, is he exploiting Gwyneth, or did he save her life by taking her in when she was an orphan? This episode never makes an actual specific judgment on that because it's set during to the mid 1800s, but it does illustrate it beautifully. The kind of situations, the kind of pressing concerns that were bearing on real people.
I think it might be both.
In every street certainly in the UK back in the 1800s.
I think it might be both. I think obviously he's a bit of an idiot, this guy, because he didn't appreciate. I can't remember her name now. What was her name? Gwyneth. He didn't appreciate Gwyneth. And also Gwyneth has that power, and he
The site. Use the
yeah,
site.
the site, yeah, and basically he's like, he's still taking advantage of her. So he I don't know. I think it's in between. Also, remember at that time is very different. Women were looked
Yes.
down upon as well, and they had servants and stuff like. So it's a very, very different time in those days. But I do feel this maybe jumping forward a bit. I do feel that the Doctor getting something wrong like that kind of leaves a bad taste in me about this episode. That's the only thing.
So in your eyes, what did he get wrong?
Well, he got the whole thing wrong, didn't he? These things wanted to take over the world, and he wanted to help. You know what I mean?
He took them at their word.
As a word, yeah, their word.
Is that wrong? Is that that's what's up for debate, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, also he was obviously berating Billy Piper. I'm about to say Rose, wasn't he? Because when she was going, that's not right. You're going to be using people's, dead people's body. We have to respect them. And he's like, this is a different moral. Get used to it or get out. Which is a bit rude of him. You know what I mean?
He's prickly and to the point of being dickish at times in this episode.
Yes, but he is.
Just like when he said to Charles Dickens to shut up, but he does apologise.
Yeah, he does.
And I think that was a very canny move on the behalf of both Mark Gatiss and Russell T Davies, whoever tweaked this script, because I know they worked on it extensively together. And that discussion between the Doctor and Rose, even though it's not. It doesn't go on and on and on and on, because this is an adventure show, and they want to sort of, by that point, even though it starts quite slow this episode, by that point they're starting to step it up a lot. It is an extension of various things that were said in The End of the World. Rose's perception of not just the universe and time and space, but of morality and the things that she thought that she believed, that's already being challenged in The End of the World. And here it's pushed on further. And from what I remember, that would continue throughout.
He's an arse because of what he went through. And I can accept that on the Chris Eccleston version of the Doctor. I can accept it. But I still don't like it, though. I don't like the feeling of going, what a twat.
Like,
you know what I mean? Yeah. I know. But
what I observed is that they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, and yet they're helping each other, because the Doctor is obviously damaged. He's lost his sort of softer side. He's very hard, and like you say, he's a bit dickish at times as well. But Billy Rose is on the other end. She's learning to. Her whole universe, her whole world and way of thinking is expanding, and she's trying to apply her very human values on a very in some cases, very alien situation, because even though this takes place on Earth's past, it's still an alien entity that they're dealing with. So she's trying to apply human values to a situation that actually did need some softening. The Doctor did need to start sort of widening his view of the situation. He's in a very sort of angry place, so he's not listening to her, and he's just assuming that I've done so much worse than this, just to get this over with and get it sorted. So I thought that was very, very clever.
I love how he breaks it down for her and how he relates it to carrying a donor card. That is the decision. That is the decision that he is wrestling with at that time. That is the connection that he's making, and that is how he's trying to reach and communicate with Rose. He's sort of at that point, because they're just growing their relationship. It's very, very early, and later on in the episode, even though he's not visibly seen to back down from that discussion with Rose, by the time it gets to the point where the Gelth are swirling around everybody's heads, the Doctor does say this is a short-term solution. There was a scene, so it goes to show he did take some in of what Rose was saying. She had not completely changed his mind or revolutionised his take on things, but I think he'd started to see that sort of grey area. There was a scene that was written for this episode which wasn't recorded. And it was what was going to happen was the Doctor was going to take Rose back to the TARDIS and materialize a transporter into the future, so she could see an Earth whereby these events, if they hadn't have remained and intervened and saw it through, whereby these events would be carried through to their natural conclusion, and where we would see a 21st century Earth that was a wasteland where the only form of movement of anything resembling life were human bodies walking about the surface inhabited by Gelth. That was abandoned. It's a riff on an idea from the classic series that we saw in Pyramids of Mars with the Doctor and Sarah Jane. And they felt that would sort of slow it down a little too much, and maybe freak people out a little, particularly the children, this early in Doctor Who's comeback. I think that would have been I think it would have been viable, and if ever Mark Gatiss does turn this into a book, I would kind of like to see that. There's a great pre-title sequence, I feel, to this story. The first totally cold one that we get, where this guy. So this is Mr. Redpath, who gets
his neck snapped
by his own deceased grandmother there, Ian. It is the stuff of nightmares. It's deliciously macabre. It's the kind of thing you
expect from Mark Gatiss, and he does it so well.
I like the way she walks towards the screen before the opening credits start, and her eyes are glowy and her mouth's open. He always goes towards the screen, and then it cuts to their TARDIS and the vortex and stuff like that.
It was genius. It was real genius.
This episode is a really good episode. There's nothing I can say that faults this episode at all. I mean, as I said, I do have a problem with getting used to the Doctor being so rough with people and calling them monkeys and the this, that, the other. But when it's saying that, because of hindsight, we know that because of the war that he went through, we know now why he's like that. But when I first watched it, I was like, how rude. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. But I think with Eccleston, he's such an accomplished actor, and he's got such screen presence that even when he's pushing those limits of what we're used to from the Doctor, you're with him because you trust him. I mean, he's the Doctor, and you think, okay, what happens? And Rose, and this is the beauty of what really good Doctor Who is to me, is that companion. She or he, whoever the companion is, they're sort of there as that. They're our eyes, but they're also there to temper the Doctor and to throw him off kilter a little bit, to make him think that little extra second before he takes an action. And I think that's what he wants as well, because obviously he wouldn't be continuing to invite companions into the TARDIS with him. He needs.
I just Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say.
Go on.
that was it, really. I mean, he just needs that foil. He needs that sort of that other person that's not a Time Lord to be bouncing off.
Yeah. I was just about to say, I love the idea of the cleverest man in a room. I love the idea that the cleverest man in a room could accept something that so doesn't make any sense. Like when they say we're going to have a seance, he knows that it's going to work because he knows the power of and also it always reminds me, because when we didn't have Doctor Who, there was Men in Black, and I don't know if you remember that scene where Tommy Lee Jones comes into the interrogation room, and Will Smith's there, and he says, so what did you see? And he said his eyes was blinking. He goes, that because he was out of breath. And then he goes, what else did he say? And he says the world's going to end. And then Tommy Lee Jones looks at him and says, did he say when? Do you know what I mean? It's like he ultimately believes him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The most ludicrous story ever, but he actually believes him. And it's the same for the Doctor in this as well. When Charles Dickens was trying to come to terms with what was going on, and the Doctor knew obviously all of it was true, and he was trying to say to him, "Look, wake up, mate. The world's bigger than you." He was just trying to say that stuff. And I love the idea that the cleverest man in the room could see more than anyone. And this is what we got with the Doctor, and he's always been like that, as far as I'm concerned. It kind of took me back to classic. This one, that's why I liked it so much.
I think it was very, very classic orientated, classic in its term of classic in sense, of its pacing. I think, considering how breathless both Rose and the End of the World had been, this takes its time. It slowly winds us up. It concentrates on the fact that we've got this updated aesthetic. I know you're not a big fan of the interior of the TARDIS and the way that's lit and how grimy it all looks. But they go into it with full conviction, and the TARDIS is sort of swaying from side to side. It's all very, very evocative. And then to drop us in Victorian London and to offer us Sneed Gwyneth there, they are. I won't say they're a other side to the coin of the Doctor and Rose, but here we have a guy dressed in a Victorian costume, obviously because he's a Victorian man, with a young girl who's in his care.
Got to change your clothes,
and it's that kind of. It's an echo of what Doctor Who used to be, and I think this is obviously Mark Gatiss is a massive classic fan, and this was, I would imagine. I mean, I know several people who count this amongst their favourite of the entire Russell T Davies era. People who've been fans during the classic time.
It's a great standalone,
and I think this is why I think because it has that middle ground between the classic sensibility and the energy and the speed of new Doctor Who, and obviously it would not remain in this place because we're at the beginnings of a journey here. But
see, this is sorry, mate. This is one of the reasons why the Doctor, and I hate to come back to this, should be a man, because in this episode he tells Rose to change. Otherwise, if she went out the way she was dressed, people would be up in arms about it. But he didn't have to change. He changed his what is it? His cardi. His jumper. His cardi.
I've changed my jumper.
Yeah, exactly.
He looks sort of indignant, doesn't he? As if to say, I look fine. I look absolutely fine.
The point I'm trying to make is, if the Doctor was a woman, obviously she would have to change her costume for this time period. If the Doctor was black, there'd be a problem too, right? Do you know what I mean? So ultimately, the Doctor is kind of a white guy, so it could work in all kinds of time zones.
I hadn't looked at it like that. I'm not sure how much water that holds, but I know what you're saying. I did want to talk about this moment for a little while though, because obviously this is Rose's first trip back in time.
It is,
and that's a wonderful bit of dialogue, isn't it, Wendy? Where he sends her to find the wardrobe room all on her own,
next to the bins.
Directions.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Next to the bins where we got the stuff to put on the TARDIS. Console, that's where it is. Yeah, right there.
Ian's favorite TARDIS console. But yeah, I love it.
Classic moments given a tune up, aren't they, Wendy?
Yeah.
They are. And again, it's something you just said, Ian, as well. This definitely felt like classic Doctor Who to me, because he sent her back into the TARDIS, down the hall. It was kind of like a Tom Baker type feel, down the hall, left, turn right, left by the bins, and it was wonderful. And then Rose's sort of excitement, and when she first sticks her foot out the TARDIS door and crunches on the snow, you're right there with her, because it's like you start imagining, my God, what would that feel like? And you're right there with her. And I think that scene just works so well, in the way Billy played it and just the way it all sort of played out. I loved that scene.
Hinted at a bit of romance, because when she comes out, he says, "Oh my God, you look beautiful." And for a human, he kind of like, switches gears, doesn't he? Quickly when he realizes what he's just said.
Yes. And for better or worse, that was the first hint. That was some of the early hints that we had.
Yeah.
But this first season really worked well for me. Even right up to the last story of this season, leading up to the kiss, because I think it wasn't. It didn't turn it into sort of Wuthering Heights to some degree,
No.
but it could be explained that he was taking that energy from her to save her life.
Yes.
Taking it into himself, because he knew he could regenerate, but he knew it would kill Rose. But Russell is very very wise, because he knew that a modern audience would relate, especially new people coming into Doctor Who. He managed to, in my view, very successfully bring in new people that may never even have watched or been interested in science fiction to a story by adding those elements that were enough to sort of give everybody a little, like a family viewing, enjoyment, but still give us Doctor Who.
All of that man's writing is about the connections between people.
Yeah.
Yes, and the connection between Doctor Who, the show, and the audience. That's one of the most important things that people keep forgetting about about
Yeah.
Russell T's writing. You know,
And
that
I'm glad you
go ahead,
mentioned when the moment where we see Rose make her first footstep into the
Yeah.
past. It's right that they hover on that moment for a few seconds, and we see her looking down at her own foot and not quite believing what she's about to do. I think when it came to going into the future, she could almost convince herself that it was a dream, whereas here she sees imagery and sights, sounds, and maybe smells, and she's wearing costumes that she's only ever seen in a book. And that's communicated with no dialogue whatsoever. Billie Piper's beautiful performance as Rose in this.
Absolutely. Yeah, she was.
Their connection is the audience, obviously, and obvious that they had scenes in there so we can connect with today's audience, like the conversation there, the picture that you've got between her and Gwyneth and about big boyfriends and stuff like that. He's got a nice bum and all that stuff that connects with the audience of today. And
because
I love
Ian, it is a little contrived how they split the Doctor and the Companion up in the classic way to send them off doing their own thing. It's worth it when you get two scenes, such as firstly the scene between the Doctor and Dickens in the cab that they flag down, and then the one between Gwyneth and Rose.
You know what?
I love that scene.
I love that scene where he goes, this is my cab, and goes, we'll get in then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's so funny where he just drags him in because this is his cab.
That lovely funny moment as well where where he's pouring praise on Charles Dickens, and then the cab, the driver says, do you want me to stop and throw him out? And he goes, well, no, he can stay now. Yeah. It was really cute. And Simon Cowell,
brilliant.
You know, genius.
This is Simon Callow, who this actor again, another character actor, great British character actor. It would have been a crime if Simon Callow hadn't have appeared in Doctor Who at some point. He'd been on the shortlist for the TV movie. Well, I say a shortlist. It was a really long shortlist for the people that they were considering to play the Eighth Doctor back in '96. And since Doctor Who, we've seen him in other geek content now. He's been in Outlander, and I understand he's about to be in The Witcher season 2 as well. But he's 72 years of age now, Simon Callow, and in the 80s he had a breakout role in a sitcom on ITV called Chance in a Million.
And also the movie.
And in the time in between, he'd gone into movies successfully, hadn't he? And you tell people which movies.
The famous one, which is Four Weddings and a Funeral. Wasn't he Four Weddings and a Funeral? Did I get that wrong?
No, he was.
I can't remember,
yes, he played the funeral. He played the funeral.
Well, there's Four Weddings and then Shakespeare in Love.
Yes, absolutely.
And back in the 80s, I think he'd sort of graduated from TV. He was in that movie A Room with a View with Judi Dench, was it? I think after that, a film career, he started to carve that out quite successfully. Smaller character parts, but the Richard Curtis was absolutely the one that did the most for him.
He's an old school actor. He knows his craft like the back of his hand. He's one of those actors that anything that's thrown at him, he will approach it in a professional manner, and he would dive into the character and become that character. It's very rare these days you find actors that are like that now. And
he initially was reluctant to take this on, Ian, because he's a real dyed-in-the-wool Dickens enthusiast and obsessive. In fact, he played Dickens several times up until this point. He played him on stage. He may have even written some sort of book or article about Dickens, and he was very concerned at how the character tended to be portrayed in popular television. And so when they went to him with this children's series that was about to be brought back, he assumed it would be a very cod take on the character, and it was apparently delighted by the script and more than happy to jump in when he saw the quality of it and the care, the research, because Mark Gatiss is also a Dickens enthusiast. I've got a few words here actually from Mark Gatiss talking about how the episode came together. So back in 2004, when the writing was all going on, and Russell T Davies was assembling his writer's room. So check this out. Mark Gatiss on the Unquiet Dead.
I knew pretty much immediately that there was going to be a sort of series Bible, and in the episode sort of guide, as it were, each story had a small paragraph, and one of them was about a Victorian story in Cardiff with Charles Dickens and seances, essentially. And I thought, well, I hope that's the one he wants me to do. And hey, poncho it was. The best thing you can have as a writer is just suddenly a collision of ideas. And I got very excited immediately. I thought, I know what I can do with this. Fake seances, all the paraphernalia that come with that. Originally, it was set in a what they used to call a spiritualist hotel, which was there would literally be a different medium on every floor, and you could just make your appointment and go and see them. And I thought it was a rather interesting idea to have all these fakes, and there was this big matronly medium called Mrs. Plumshoot, and she was a fake. And then on one floor there was a man called Sneed, who was the real thing, although he didn't know it, but he'd been in contact with what he thought was the dead, in fact, was this alien race.
Wow, look how that developed.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that took a few turns along the
Exactly.
Went through several titles, several working titles, and several versions of the same general shape of it. And it was Gatiss that came up with the idea of it being set at Christmas too. That was something
I like the idea.
Wanted to do because of his fondness for the M.R. James ghost stories for Christmas that the BBC used to broadcast in the 70s. And funny enough, since this episode was broadcast, Gatiss himself has kind of picked up that mantle and started making those ghost stories on BBC 4, I think, or BBC 2 now, maybe. Every Christmas, he's usually the creative force behind that. But I thought it was nice to hear him speak about this, because there's a lot of popular myths out there about the production process, about how much Russell T Davies wrote, how much he didn't, how much control he had over it. But yeah, that he did issue them, these sort of 2-line statements. Charles Dickens at a seance, it's like, go.
Well, I don't know how they do it. And I know in America, when they're making a sitcom and they have all the writers in the table, everybody's throwing jokes in and they're all laughing. And the ones that make them laugh most, they actually make notes of it. I don't know how it works in England. I don't know whether he came up with that idea and then they had a big brainstorming session, and then it ended up the way it ended up. I don't know. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know.
I think it's time that we took a look on to YouTube and Facebook and the comments coming from the people in the chat, see what they've got to say about this episode. Simon Horton, the original Lunatic, one of Type 40's finest, he says, definitely one of the Ninth Doctor's best episodes, but the only good episode from Mark Gatiss for me.
I
agree.
We have a message calling from the Darren Zone on YouTube. It says the pre-credits scene is one of the best, pushing it as much as possible for 7 p.m. on a Saturday. Fantastic.
Yep.
The Jester says, I felt like this episode worked better than some of Nine's era because it didn't have the frenetic pace of an episode like Rose or World War III. That is true. I think it frustrated some people, this, but it does, when it cranks up, it really cranks up, doesn't it, Ian?
Yeah, it does. As I said, I really enjoyed this episode, and I Simon Cowell's performance was absolutely brilliant as far as I'm concerned, and it's just a joy to watch, isn't it? This episode's just a joy to watch. So reminds me of classic. That's why I like this episode so much. Here we go.
We have yes, you're being brought up on a couple of points here from YouTube. Mega the Extremist says, Ian, actually, he wasn't the cleverest person in the episode, sadly. Dickens actually figured it all out. That's my one issue with the story. That is true. He resolves the situation.
Yeah, I would argue the point. The Doctor is the cleverest man in the room. Yes, Dickens came up and with the idea how to get rid of him. But then again, the Doctor was stuck in jail with Rose. So he couldn't do anything, could he? He was stuck behind the door with Rose. So, and I didn't mind if Dickens saved the day because I really liked that character. I really liked it.
Exactly. And it's an adventure in space and time. It's not all about this one swaggering hero going around getting everything right and always having the answer. I agree with that.
And also he has a journey, doesn't he, Dickens, from not believing, then right at the very end, being a coward as well, wanting to run, then right at the end, and he becomes alive. That's what he says to them. I'm alive again.
But
little did he know.
It's also the same. It's the same thing with A Christmas Carol. That's what I loved about this. Yeah. It's got the classic Christmas Carol vibe. They even had the little touch with a Gelf are
That's
swirling around the door knocker on the
Doorknob,
outside of the, which I thought was a wonderful little touch.
Yes, yes, and as I said, he's got a journey, so that's why it was great that he saved the day, because he realized there was more to life than his books and what he thinks. He thought he knew everything about life, as he says, but he didn't, did he? So. And he comes to the conclusion that he needs to save the day, and that's what he does. And if it wasn't for the Doctor, he wouldn't be in a position to grow. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, I would say the Doctor was still the cleverest man in any room or out or any street.
I agree.
Yeah,
we've got another person agreeing with you here, Ian. We've got Dr. Blazed watching on YouTube, says the TARDIS console room did look great with the minimal lighting in the episode. Disagreeing with you, sorry. That's so they disagree.
It's green and orange they were using in this version, the lighting in the TARDIS. So there's a lot of green in there as well. The
Jester here brings up a point about this dickish side to the Ninth Doctor we see. He says, having something terrible in the Doctor's unseen past that we don't know about helps Nine, and that we want to know more about why he was so harsh. And it's better than the Sixth Doctor, for example, just being a jackass to
Perry.
It's
totally
written
agree.
on different levels, isn't it? It's real pathos. I think that's the difference.
Well, that's RT, isn't it? That's RT.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, he didn't just make the Doctor a harsh character. He had an actor that he knew could play that edginess very, very well, quite naturally, but he gave him an appropriate backstory to explain that. And it was just all done so well.
Yeah.
Alex Storer adds, I've only ever watched The Unquiet Dead twice, but I enjoyed it immensely on both occasions. I don't rate Gatiss as a writer at all, but this was his best. It was also a proper time travel story too. What I liked about this is the fact that, and it's really early in the new series, we get the idea that they were supposed to go to one place, but the Doctor has taken the TARDIS has taken them to another, taken them maybe where they need to go, and of course it does it puts down seeds for so many things that are going to come in the future. But here on the Night, it's just playful. It's that classic sensibility, and the fact that the Doctor, he just goes with it, and he says to Rose, "Oh, it's not Naples, it's Cardiff," and she. Okay, but she joins him anyway. If he's up for it, then so is she, and they link arms and off into the snow they go. Again, a simple message, simple companionship, and the relationship between them growing, her trust in him, also re-establishing itself, underlining itself, however you want to look at it, and their relationship beginning to sort of grow, and the adventure for us really sort of continuing, picking up where we left it off.
Is this the first time we get those words, bad wolf?
Yes. No, it isn't. We hear it in the End of the World. The Mox of Balhoun says,
"Of course,
what we are seeing is the bad wolf scenario."
Yes.
That was dubbed in afterwards. I understand. This was the initial first episode where we hear the words
actually
bad
say
wolf,
it. Yeah,
and that scene between, we mentioned it earlier on, that scene between Rose and Gwyneth. There's so much in that. It's very, very funny. The differences between a 21st century 19-year-old and one from 1860, and they have a lot of fun with that. Again, beautifully written. Come to think of it, let's lavish a little praise, because this was the very first time that I ever saw Eve Miles on television.
Yes, definitely. I was going to bring her up if we hadn't if you hadn't got to this stage. She's by and far one of my favorite actresses now, because I remember seeing her in this, and then when she eventually was in Torchwood, she could have easily carried that entire series. I thought, I enjoyed all the actors in it, but she is such a brilliant, strong actor. And I'm going to sneak a little mention in that I think she would make a very good Romana.
Yeah,
because I think she's got the strength of personality to do it, but that's another conversation.
She is, in my view, she is one of the most underappreciated actresses in the country.
Absolutely.
And that sounds really weird for somebody who's never off TV. I mean, I think since Doctor Who, we've seen her in shows like Broadchurch, Keeping Faith, You, Me and Us, that sitcom that she did with Anthony Head, which I thought was delightful. She was in a very British Scandal, the Russell T Davies show with Hugh Grant and Ben Whishaw. She played a character that was so far removed from both Gwyneth and Gwen. It was worlds away. A brilliant performance. She was in Victoria alongside Jenna Coleman, and in a show that I haven't seen over on what's it called? The channel. It's not on Dave. I can't remember what channel it's on. It's called We Hunt Together. Maybe UK TV drama, one of those cable channels that's part of the UK TV network. She's in that. That looks really good. It looks really sort of potent and a little bit cultish, but I've never seen that. She's done work for the Shakespeare National Shakespeare Company. Lots and lots of good, solid stuff. This is somebody who paid her dues, and here she was. She was only 26, 27 when she appeared in the Unquiet Dead, and it's just a really warm, relatable performance that stays completely centered. She's the center of this, and that bond that she forms with Rose in particular, that's where the feeling comes from. That's why, even though this story does start to move quite quickly in the second half, and the stakes really escalate, and this servant girl from the 1800s is put in a situation where she's got to make some really big decisions. But it works because Eve Miles inhabits the part so wholly.
Something you said earlier, Dan, about Simon Callow, in as much as he throws himself into those roles that he plays. I observed that with Eve Miles as well. When you watch her act, she has become that character so thoroughly that you can forget completely that she's just an actor playing a role. She really, really inhabits those characters so beautifully. And when I was watching her in Keeping Faith, particularly, she was, again, just throws herself into the role. So definitely one of the most impressive actors I've ever seen, and definitely very much underappreciated. And
and because Rose goes to great effort, doesn't she, Ian, to relate to her, and she patronizes her, doesn't she? Gwen calls her up on it. Gwyneth, calls her up on it. She recognized the fact that she's being slightly patronized.
Well, I think even in the last episode, Rose has got to be the human, within the situation. So Rose quickly makes friends with her, has connection. Same thing with the woman that was repairing the lift or something like that in the last episode. She makes connection there, because that's for the audience. So that's for the audience to connect to Rose fast. And as I said, Russell T's a really good writer. We don't know anything about Gwyneth, but that conversation between those two actually connects you as a viewer to the actual adventure itself. If she wasn't there, yes, the Doctor would be running around, but your brain and yourself wouldn't be so invested in the episode if it wasn't for Rose. So it's good that Rose is like that, because it drags the audience into the adventure even more so, in my opinion. As an actress, she's okay. I don't really find her anything special at all. I've seen her in other stuff. I think she's okay as an actress. She's obviously in there with the actors crowds, because she's been in TV quite a lot. They say that if you're not part of the lucky, was it 4,000? You're not getting a job. So she's part of the lucky. That's an actor saying.
As we come to that, Ian, I wanted to ask you, because as the episode really gets deep into the more geekishness and the sci-fi elements start to come about, they gather together for the seance, don't they? And the alien beings do show themselves through Gwyneth.
Yeah.
This, for me, is where the director of this story is Euros Lyn. And although I'd liked what we'd seen on screen up until this point, the colour palette and all the rest of it, here I think is where we see a lot of creative touches. What did you think about the direction? As somebody who does direct some of these scenes, how do you feel it's all expanded like that?
It's okay. The direction is pretty A to B. It's okay. There's nothing special about direction at all. I mean, I know it's hard for people to understand if you really
it's hard to know what to look for if we're not a director.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at episodes of Columbo that Spielberg directed, you can tell that's that's a real director. If you look at this, it's very pedestrian. It's just, you know, you got the wide shot, you got the over the shoulder shot. She doesn't really, or he doesn't really play around with the camera much and stuff like that. And you know, it's directed fine. You know, I can't complain. But I love how loads of nods to everything. You know, I mean, I'm saying that there's a nod to Raiders of the Lost Ark here with the all ghosts spinning around. Do you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark at the ending with the ghosts spinning around and stuff? When I first saw that, I was thinking that's Raiders, isn't it?
Scene.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's, as I said, this is the Doctor Who we want, isn't it?
Yes.
We want
it seems like to me, as somebody who doesn't direct, it seems to me like it's a director who is having a lot of fun doing this. He's relishing these moments too, such as when the human cadavers, when the Gelth enter them and they start sitting up, you know, and you've got the guy with the great big wiry beard and the mad stare. You know, it's all horror tropes all the way through this. But of course, if you're 7 or 8 years of age,
you're gonna
in 2005, this is the first time you've seen this stuff.
Also, I love the idea that they use a child's voice to sucker you in. You know, you use their child's voice to suck you in to think that they're innocent and that they're you know, they want the best for the world. And then when it reveals itself, the child's voice completely goes. So that's quite cool, I thought.
Without, I won't touch on it. I won't cover it in great depth. But the elements to this story, you say, using the child's voice, and when the true nature of the Gelth is revealed, that they do want to take over the world. You know, they are malevolent. They do want to brush away humanity. There was a lot of controversy about this at the time. There's a writer, I don't know if either of you have heard of Lawrence Miles, who was a writer on the book range, on the Doctor Who book range in the 90s, notorious, very, very strong views about all things Doctor Who. And for many people, it's still seen as a crying shame that he's never worked on the show. He wrote a book called Alien Bodies as part of the BBC range for the 8th Doctor, which is absolutely awesome. It is fantastic. But he is... he has a habit through his blog of posting and ideas and essays that are how can I put this, incendiary. And his take on this story, he went all in on Mark Gatiss with views about all the texture and the themes of this story and what he believed it was saying about the subject of immigration. And what Mark Gatiss was trying to paint out immigrants as being evil. And you know, I mean, I think that Lawrence Miles is way off base.
I think that's a bit of a stretch.
It is. Intention is absolutely everything, and I do not believe that Mark Gatiss intended. I think that's a viable subject for a sci-fi story to explore. I say, if you're watching Chris Chibnall, explore, not give us a lecture about, explore. But in this instance, Mark Gatiss, I don't believe he was anywhere near that. But that has kind of dogged this episode in the minds of the fan base ever since. That it could be about this, it could be about that, and realistically, even though there are some complex things that are touched on in this between the Doctor and Rose, for the most part, I think it is largely a romp, and it is Doctor Who. So, of course, the monsters have got to be bad guys, Ian, haven't they?
Yeah, the problem with creating stuff, as a creator myself, and as people know, I've made feature films. It's really funny because when people say stuff like that to you, you either go, yeah, that's what it was all about when it really wasn't. Or you go, no, that's not what I was trying to say, you know. So, you know, a lot of people see a lot of different things in a lot of creative works, don't they? So, and this guy just sees that, and if Mark Gatiss says that's not what it was about, then that's not what it was about. Agreed. He could say whatever he wants, but Mark Gatiss is the one that actually created the actual episode, wrote it, so he should know, you know.
So I think it could be a case of... Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say intention is everything, and how a writer cannot possibly legislate for one of a million ways in which their work may be received.
Exactly.
That is on you, Lawrence, or on any of us out there watching. Go on, sorry,
exactly. And I think I was thinking exactly the same thing, Dan. That you know that the viewer has, you know, is going to take away his or her own, you know, perspective on the episode.
Yeah.
And if they have a particular sensitivity to a particular subject, they might project a little bit of that concern onto a specific episode that maybe wasn't intended to be there. But again, that's down to the viewer, and I don't think that's really the fault of the writer of the story.
Of course not.
I mean, if Mark had come out after and said, "Well, yeah, that I did sort of weave that in. I'm impressed that people picked that up," but he didn't, and like you said, Dan, it's about intent. It's about intent. And when I watched that story on both occasions now, I that never crossed my mind. I just felt like I was watching a good, spooky, sort of M.R. James-ish, classic Christmas tale that just had a really great balance of all those different elements. It had a little bit of lightheartedness. It had a little bit of,
it is really strange how people see things. Like, if you take, I don't know, the Shawshank Redemption, a lot of people say that's the depiction of Christ, don't they? I remember reading about that. They say that, the guy's in jail, then he goes through all the crap and he comes out and he's clean. It's like Christ and all that. And it's like, well, you see what you want to see. It doesn't necessarily say that the writer actually intended to be like that. Do you know what I mean? So this is just the case right here.
Well, there may very well be occasions where either consciously or unconsciously, perhaps they are projecting some of their own internal thought processes onto their creative work, and that's fair enough. But I think, as we said, it's the intent, and if the intent is to entertain and something that sort of deep happens to transfer itself into the story, as long as the story isn't intended to upset people or isn't intended to be overly political, then I don't see. For me, anyway, it didn't.
I like to mention it was pretty clever that that the Doctor said to Charles Dickens, "I'm a fan," and he didn't know what that meant. You want to cool yourself down or something like. I can't remember what he said, but I thought it was really, this. The more I think about this episode, the more I think it's one of my favourites out of the Chris Eccleston run. It is very. It's a standalone thing. It stands alone as a Doctor Who episode.
It does, and I've always enjoyed this story. I've never been tempted to skip it, for example. Even though you see, for me, Series 1 and Doctor Who generally, Russell T Davies, his sensibilities with this show, his voice, the balance of scares to thrills, of humour to drama, is exactly to my taste, and I absolutely adore both of the episodes that have come before Rose and The End of the World, and the two that come directly afterwards. And this is sandwiched by two double bills of pure Russell T Davies joy for me. And so I have always overlooked it a little. This time when I watched it, which had been the first time in 4 or 5 years, I absolutely loved it. Really and truly loved it. And I think that although I think the last couple of times I'd watched it on autopilot. There was moments, and there were elements to the story and the script, and I've seen, you can see the traces of the things that were peeled away from it. But I think the decisions that they made, all the things that we heard Mark Gatiss talk about earlier on in the clip about the Spiritualist Hotel, all that, it's fascinating stuff. But I think that it was I think stripping it back to this was really, really wise, because
that's what they do.
It keeps the momentum, the simplicity of the characters. But it uses that new format of 45 minutes so perfectly. Probably Mark Gatiss probably uses it more effectively than Russell T Davies does.
Yeah, no. Sorry, go ahead.
I also love how the Gelth, the first people, the first characters to mention the Time War by name, even though the Doctor kind of mentioned at the end that they're the ones who call it the Time War. So you see the building of that legend too. That's a nice touch. The fact that because they are refugees from that Time War in the same way that the Autons are in Rose, and so the Doctor's he's continuing to mop up.
I prefer that if they didn't mention the time didn't because I guess Moffat gave us the whole Time War thing and stuff like that. But looking back, I really do. I keep saying Russell T's really, really did a really good job on Doctor Who, because not knowing what happened in the Time War, speculation is and thinking about it is so much more powerful than actually seeing what actually happened. You know, when we didn't know what happened, if you know what I mean. Now I know what happened because Moffat showed us, didn't he? So, but when I first watched this, you can only wonder about the Time War. Must have been spectacular. That, you know, billions died. You know, the time got retconned and stuff like that, and you know, it was a good thing to have in your mind. It's like being frightened is like the shadows are more scarier than actually what's in the shadow, if you know what I mean. That kind of thing. Yeah.
And I did wonder in between the episodes, Wendy, and in between the seasons too, you know, you do start to imagine what it was like as we do meet more and more characters who were survivors of it or were affected by it, or people who are running away from it, and the Doctor lets on more about it. And whilst it probably couldn't remain in that place forever, I thought back here in Series 1, watching it again, I could almost forget. I was that caught up in this episode, Wendy, that I could almost forget that I'd seen how it does play out, and I'd sort of seen the Time War. Even, you know, we've seen, as you said, Ian, we've seen a lot of this stuff now, and yet these episodes are so evocative. They cast such a great spell that they can seduce you all over again in 40 minutes flat.
That's spot on, Dan, because I mean that's what I was thinking when I was watching it. You know, and like you said, we've actually seen how the rest of this has played out, but as we said earlier, they're really good as one-off stories on their own. And when I was watching this again earlier today, I was swept away, and I didn't have this feeling of like, oh, someone's told me the ending to the story, or I already read the book. It's like a book that you can reread over and over again. And that's the sign of something that has really, really touched you and really reached you, because, you know, there's nothing worse than somebody saying, you know, oh, I read that book, this happens at the end. But when you read a book yourself and you get all the way to the end and you think that was so good, I have to re-experience that. And that's what this episode feels like. And
also, do you remember that I didn't even register this when I first saw it? The bit where Rose says, "You lock me in a room with with zombies," and and don't think that I didn't notice your hands were wandering. Remember that? So I was like, when I watched it today, I was like, oh, I don't remember her saying that. Did they cut it out when BBC broadcast it? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
And that's why the character reminds me. That's what the character reminds me of somebody like Joe Bell, who was leching after Perry the entire time he was in. This is a softer version of the same kind of character. Not quite a dirty old man, but probably, you know, if he was given the opportunity, he probably would be.
Another thing that sorry, Wendy. Another thing that really just I went, whoa, is when he kicks the door in for Rose, and Rose obviously scuttles behind the Doctor. The two zombies are walking towards it, and then the Doctor says something like, "What do you want?" And they stop and they answer him. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know whether they sensed the presence that he was something more than human. That's why they stopped. I don't know why.
Most of them do, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
They all tend to sort of have he either mentions the Doctor, or they just get an idea that he's, you know, it's like the character in the episode just prior to this one. The lady who played the Jabe. She has an inkling of him as soon as she meets him.
Yeah, they know that he's not afraid. I think that's a large part of it as well.
Yeah. And that to me, that's essentially the Doctor. You know, I think they stop because they don't sense any fear in him. That's what it is. He stands there and he goes, "Well, what do you want?" Do you know what I mean? And then they suddenly stop. They've thrown because everybody runs from them, don't they, and stuff like that. So I think things like that is essentially the Doctor, which is obviously missing from the new iteration, but we won't go down that road. But I think, right, apart from Dalek, this is Chris Eccleston's greatest performance. Yes, he, you know, you would probably say, oh yeah, the last three he was brilliant in that, but the last three he was overacting, and you know, the stakes were higher. But with this one, this is just an ordinary adventure for the Doctor, and Chris Eccleston plays the part beautifully. in this totally beautifully.
It's as you say, it's not a season finale. It's not a season opener where they've got to sort of set these pegs down in the soil. This is bread and butter Doctor Who, and bread and butter Doctor Who.
Talking about bread and butter.
One of very few. He's just been brought his dinner.
My mum just brought my stuff.
Bread and butter Doctor Who. There are very few examples of this in series 1, simply because of the way that it was structured. It's not for better, not for any worse. I do think they did the right thing in structuring it as it did. But I know what you mean. It may. We talked a little bit earlier on about the fact that Charles Dickens is the one who, he comes to the Doctor and Rose's aid, doesn't he? And the whole thing starts to, he recognised the fact that you can draw the Gelf out of the human bodies, and everybody can sort of gradually make their escape. And it's it's the kind of solution that is complex enough for you to be a few seconds behind it, and I'd say, what? Oh, okay. So you're struggling to keep up, maybe, but it's not going to leave children behind who are watching. It's you can, even if you can't understand it, you can follow it, you can piece it together, you can root for Charles Dickens, who by that point we really, really like. I forgot to mention the fact that to Mr. Sneed, I wanted to say this when we were talking about him a moment ago. He also gets his neck snapped, and a girl enters him. And for all that this character is quite an unlikable guy, you feel really sorry that he's killed. Well, I did.
I don't. I didn't. I thought he was horrible.
I think he is, but I think he's also of his time, and I think he's trying to do in his own mind what he thinks is best, but he isn't. No, he's not. He's not a nice character, and I don't. You don't like the way that he speaks to.
He's a complex character.
To Gwyneth, he is complex, exactly. So, it's. I didn't find myself like cheering to that degree, because I think there's been characters that you did want to cheer, when if they didn't quite make it through the episode, but you definitely can, like you say, he's a complex character. So
he didn't have an arc, though. Everybody else had an arc.
He didn't.
He's just there to
that's true.
Facilitate the story. I think he was just there to facilitate the story.
Yeah,
expires for the good of the story.
He does.
Believe it or not, originally the character was going to be a much younger man, and Gatiss had a mind to cast David Tennant in the role because they were friends.
Oh, holy moly! That would have been interesting. That would have been very interesting.
They would have had to do a little explanation like they did with Capaldi, how he'd somehow morphed from the character in.
They didn't need to do that. They really didn't need to do that.
It's almost would have been better if they'd left it alone, I think.
Exactly.
By this point, David Tennant, like Mark Gatiss, was kind of circling Doctor Who. Both had worked extensively for Big Finish Productions. Mark Gatiss has had several novels published for the Virgin New Adventures Doctor Who line, and I think for the BBC line too, BBC Books. So these were two guys. Looking back, David Tennant was always going to be involved in Doctor Who in some capacity or another. Anyway, I suppose the story reaches its head, as happens with a great many Doctor Who stories, most of them with a bloody great big explosion, but not before we've seen Gwyneth make this sacrifice. She's incredibly brave and generous and trusting of these. She calls them her angels, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She was doomed anyway. She was doomed from the start. She saved everyone. I mean, Charles Dickens saved everyone as well, but she was instrumental, wasn't she, in saving them?
What I loved about her story, her character arc in the series is that she, we don't know a lot about her, but we obviously just all we know is that she is a product of her time. And yet at the end, she makes this incredible sacrifice. And even though she makes it perhaps thinking slightly wrongly that it's that they're angels, or that it's going to have some connection with her belief system, she's still very brave, and she's quite wise as well, which she proves, and that's what I liked about it. She isn't just a sort of two-dimensional character. She's, she comes through And again, what we see in a lot of Who stories is people, ordinary human beings being brave and being that little extra special.
Yeah, but Wendy, do you think the Doctor lied at the ending, though? And the reason why I'm asking you this question, and Dan, the reason why I'm asking you, and the people,
you mean whether or not she was actually dead?
I see.
Yes, because he says the moment she stepped under the arch, she was dead, but yet she had the power to actually strike that match for the good of the situation. So was the Doctor lying to Rose when he
said? Yes, it's a good point.
Was she still in there? Was she still in there?
Watching it again today is funny because I did get to that scene and I was thinking to myself, how is that happening? How is that working? But perhaps because of her connection to the rift energy or something, your imagination then just sort of wants to fill the gap. It's like, okay, I don't want to sort of see too much of a big story hole here. But I agree with you. I think that scene, I was kind of like, okay, she's dead, but she's not. Which is it?
But maybe, just thinking about it now, maybe when he says that she was dead immediately when she stepped under the arch, maybe he meant that she was trapped and there was no way for her to come out. That's why she was dead. Maybe he meant that. But it is a big question, isn't it? It's a huge question to ponder over whether the Doctor was lying, because
she was biologically dead, but not.
Yeah, well, that too could be that too. Yes.
But I get where you're coming from, Ian. Yeah, and that's a good point. And perhaps if they'd had more time to slightly stretch that scene out a little bit longer, they might have been able to sort of quantify that a little bit. And I suppose through the editing process, maybe they have no choice but to.
I do like that's why this episode is so good and harks back to the classic era, because the Doctor sometimes would go dark, and for me this is one of these times when he did go dark, in my opinion, because he was very rude to people and stuff like that, and it's justified because obviously he's suffering from the Time War and he's just getting over it and he's just getting to trust people and stuff like that. So as I said, this is more classic to me. This episode's more classic to me than New Who. The actual tone and the story of it, with money, of course, because if this was shot in the 70s, it'd just be like one set and that's it.
For all that you say that it's got money, this began the series fascination, which I know this amuses a lot of people out there. Fascination with Cardiff. It's the fact that it grounds itself in Cardiff as a sort of base of operations, and this point of contact with alien races that they name as the rift that we see get played out, not just in Doctor Who but in Torchwood. It all begins here. So much starts here. They start setting the foundations down for Doctor Who's very first proper spin-off that would actually go to a full series. But the irony is that very little of this was actually filmed anywhere near Cardiff. It was all filmed in Swansea. Most of it was filmed in Swansea. Apparently there's hardly any Victorian architecture left in Cardiff, and my son lives in Cardiff, and I was just thinking back when I heard that, I thought, you come to mention it, there isn't. See, the bulk of it was filmed in Swansea, and yet
that wide shot down the road, and it does look very Victorian, doesn't it? The wide shot that they show.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the little courtyards, the little areas. I mean, particularly at the end of the episode, we get a lovely classic sci-fi style wrap up. It sort of warms the cockles of your hearts, really. It's perfect Christmas episode wind up, come to think of it. I do sometimes watch this at Christmas, but where the Doctor and Rose go back to the TARDIS, we get that fun little speech about what is it you do in there exactly, Doctor? Well, a bit of this, bit of that, whatever else. And we get a knowing look, a bit of whimsy. And that moment though, where Charles Dickens asks the Doctor, he says, "There's still one question you haven't answered." It gives me chills. Something in all of these episodes gives me the simplest of chills.
I felt sorry for Charles Dickens because he was alive and then next year he's going to be dead.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah, so I just felt sorry for him.
It lent a real poignancy to that final scene. And it also reminded me of the story in Matt's run with Van Gogh and how he took him back to specifically be able to see that all of his work wasn't for nothing. That he was beloved and it still chokes me up every time I see that
That line, isn't
particular
it?
story.
I
Yeah.
think
It's that line where he goes, sorry, mate, it's just that line where he goes, does my stories last? And he goes, how long does it last for? And he goes, forever. Do you know what I mean? And that's gotta warm anyone's heart if they're creative, you know what I mean, knowing that.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Now you've
yeah.
mentioned that episode from later on. I think this is actually better. I think this is nowhere near. I do like the Van Gogh episode, but I think that this is not as mawkish. I think it's cleaner. I think Simon Callow plays it better. I think this is better. Yeah,
It is better. And another thing that you guys probably don't notice is that within every shot that's framed in this episode, the Doctor's always lurking in the background. I don't know if you guys notice that.
Yes. Yeah.
So like for instance, when Rose is trying to revive Gwyneth, in the back, when you see the Doctor just leaning up against the wall, he's always lurking in the background because he's the man that knows more than anyone in the room.
He knows when something is futile.
Yes,
but he's not going to say to Rose, "Look, you're wasting your time." He knows she needs to find that out for herself.
Yes,
she needs to physically do something or explore something psychologically, see something through to its natural conclusion, and he will be there for her afterwards to help her come to terms with what she's just seen, what she's just mentally processing, however you want to look at it, because he is another form of life. He's lived for a lot longer, and his duty of care to her extends beyond a radius that she can possibly understand. It's something that only he knows.
Yeah.
Well, he's got the universe in his head, isn't he? He knows every. I'm guessing now. He knows every. Well, as much as he explored, he knows more than any. Again, he knows more than anyone in the room. What can I say? But that's what I like about Doctor Who most of all.
Watching these episodes again, seeing Billie Piper in this character again makes me remember why I liked her so much. Then, I mean, I still like her now, but I watch less of what she does, and I think I'd forgotten how relatable she was in this part, how timely it all was.
Oh my God, Digislate!
How good they were together.
That's when the Digislate came into TV and stuff like that. The Digislate. Oh gosh. That's going back a bit, isn't it? Wow. And that's the raid I was talking about, Dan.
Yes.
That looks very Victorian, doesn't it? I mean, it really does.
Yeah. The one thing with Billie's portrayal of Rose is if I had to pick a season where I preferred her portrayal over, let's say, a different season, I still my favorite is this first run with Eccleston, and I thought she and David Tennant had a fantastic chemistry as well. But they had their own. They had their own chemistry. It was very different to the chemistry than what she had with Chris. And that's my favorite because it was still quite new. It was still quite raw, and they both played very well against each other, I thought. And I liked the way Billie was coming across. The following season, she was, and again, we have seen this with other companions further down the line as well. They get a little bit cocky. They get a little bit too overconfident. Some things sometimes happen. So, but I do prefer that first season, I think.
Yeah, and as I said, I think Chris, more so than the other two episodes, is the Doctor in this one, in my opinion. I just love his performance in this. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't silly. He wasn't trying to crack jokes. He was just being the Doctor. Yes, he was unnecessarily rude, but we understand now why he was. But you can't fault him in this episode at all. At all.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's take a look firstly, I think, at the ratings for this episode. The overnights were 8.3 million, with the consolidated figure going up to 8.86 million. Yeah, this is week 3 as well. The audience share, they got 37% of the entire audience share of the people who were watching TV at that moment. Wow. And the audience appreciation index figure was a strong 80. There were some criticisms from parents, understandably, I suppose, and probably predictably, who felt that this was too scary for their young children. But the BBC, they dismissed those complaints on the
Of
grounds
course,
that it was
quite rightly so.
never really intended
Yeah.
for really, really young children. They'd gone to great lengths, and the BBC had gone. They had at this point in 2005. They'd gone to great lengths to make sure that
Yeah.
the target audience knew who they were, and that this was for the entire family to watch together. So I actually agree with the BBC doing that.
Yeah, and do you
Yeah.
know what, Janet? You've just reminded me very, very quickly. One of the times we went down to the Doctor Who experience, one of my first times there, they had, you know how they always have the interactive bit.
Yes.
Well, we were there. I think it was my first time there, and they had this amazing interactive Dalek adventure, and the Daleks came out on these plinths from the dark, and they were full-size Daleks, and it was properly scary. It was a really immersive experience. They had the TARDIS materialize beautifully with special effects in the corner, and the Daleks were screaming at you, and there was there were parents there, and one of them was holding this very tiny, young child that was still being carried around, basically. And he or she, I can't remember, was screaming their heads off, terrified, because there was a lot of flashing lights, there was loud sounds. And as you say, I think people were making the mistake of at times, I think, that it was going to be like a happy, shiny children's show. And it really wasn't. It was a family show. So you had to be careful with that. And shortly after that, we noticed that the interaction element got a little bit less menacing. It got a little bit less, and it took a little something away from it, in my view. And towards the very end, it got very childlike, and it was a shame, because you don't want to rob the children of that experience, but it's also a show for bigger kids and for adults. It's a family show. So I think they lost something there towards the end, which was a shame.
I think parents judge their kids by what they experienced when they were younger. But what they don't realize is that kids know more than they ever did when they were that age. So kids are far more, braver and far more understanding when it comes to things like horror on screen and TV and stuff like that. As long as it's not too horrific, kids will just laugh it off. Do you know what I mean? And if it scares them, that's part of the experience as well,
And they leapt on the Doctor Who character options figure range.
Excellent.
They started to appear.
Love it.
And although there weren't many things that were inspired by the Unquiet Dead, but we did get this Gelth zombie figure that we're looking up on screen now for those watching on YouTube. Yeah, so this came out, this figure of the grandma from that very first scene, and with the glow in the dark hands as well. So that was lots of fun for the kids there who could sleep that night, or maybe they wanted to frighten the pants off their little brother or sister, whatever else, with a Gelth zombie figure. Let's have a look over to the chat, the people watching on YouTube and Facebook, and see what their thoughts are as we reach the end of this review. Alex Storer adds, in Series 1, the fundamentals of the show were firmly fixed in place. Wide creative scope, but with a clear framework, if you like. And that's why stories like The Unquiet Dead worked so well. I think that's kind of
true. Totally agree.
We have Simon Callow was great in Chance in a Million, says Crimpling Doubloon. I thought I was the only person who remembered that. And then adds, didn't Judi Dench see his bum in A Room with a View? You'd have to ask Judy. About that one. I have absolutely no idea. Game Closet adds, Dickens becomes his Scrooge character upon his redemption.
He does.
He slides away with a new lease on life. Yes, well spotted. Yes, he does. I'd forgotten all about that.
He has growth.
The Darren Zone says, Eve Miles is a Welsh national treasure. We love her. Enigmatic Joker adds that Eve Miles is a supporting character in the entire Doctor Who franchise. I would probably agree with that too. More people voting for yes, Eve Miles is Romana. Lots of comments like that, in fact. But Kelly adds that she really hates the whole romance thing. Lots more people say that.
Yeah, you can't take that too far at times, I think.
Yeah. What else is here?
Also, when all the gas was happening, and obviously Rose was hiding her mouth, and so was Charles. But the Doctor wasn't. That means to say he's not affected by stuff like that, via gas, via air, or.
He's
You
got
know,
Perhaps he
a
just has a stronger constitution for it.
yeah,
Maybe.
probably, or lungs, different lungs. Maybe he's got 2 lungs.
Well, I don't know how. This is where this is where the classic fan steps in. This is
Yeah.
I don't know if they mentioned this much in the new series, but he's got a binary vascular system.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
There we
the
go.
idea.
There we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
So he will last a little bit longer than us.
Okay.
There's people here bemoaning the fact, as is often the case when we talk about Eccleston's Doctor, the fact that Eccleston did only appear in the one season. Vanessa Law adds it would have been interesting to see if his Doctor did mature
Yes.
as it was going along.
Shame.
That broke me, that did.
That's such a shame. Yeah.
Dr. Blazed tells us to head to Street View on Google Maps and look for Cambrian Place in Swansea. And there are most of the exteriors used in the filming of this episode. Vanessa also adds, yes, Wendy, the chemistry between with Eccleston is better. Billy got a little silly with David Tennant at times.
Yes.
So, yeah, people are generally, I think, pretty upbeat about this episode. I think it's like I said, it was not exactly a revelation to me, but it was certainly a lot more enjoyable than I remembered. But Ian, this is the point where we have to give adjudication, my friend. So what I want to know is how many rattling cadavers would you give this out of 5, this episode?
I'd give this one a 4. I wouldn't give it a 5 because nothing's perfect, right? But it was close to a Doctor Who episode that was needed, if you know what I mean. So I think 4 is a really good grade to give it, in my opinion.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't give it 2. Don't give it 2. Wendy, how about you? How many rattling cadavers out of 5 do you give the Unquiet Dead by Mark Gatiss?
Oh, I'm gonna be good cop. I'm gonna give it 5. I'm gonna give it 5. But yeah, no, I because of how it made me feel, because I want a Christmas episode to leave me, to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but just leave me feeling really positive at the end. And I think it definitely did that. So
yes. Yeah, definitely.
I think I'm going to go for a healthy 4 out of 5. Yeah. For everything that I said about it earlier on, I think, I put it level pegging with Rose, but I think the end of the world still has it for me. There's something about that story.
Oh, really?
And yet, I'm struggling to think of any ways in which this could have been better. So maybe I should give it a 5. Yes, you know what? I'm going to change my vote. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 as well. I've got to be good as my word, because I sincerely can't think of any way in which this could have been bettered. It was. It's been. How can I put this? Watching all 3 of these stories, one after the other, like this, as people have said, it kind of has a similar function to An Unearthly Child, the Daleks, and the Edge of Destruction back in the classic show. This sets everything up. It completes the picture, if you like, and wraps up an arc, because when this closes out and the Doctor and Rose, they disappear, leaving Charles Dickens wandering off in the snow like that, we have every reason to believe that everything that we've seen up until this point happens in really close proximity, like one event after another. And from this point, from when they dematerialize until when we next see them, we don't know necessarily how long it could be for the Doctor and Rose. And as a trilogy of stories, if you like,
the next episode.
And regardless of where the series goes afterwards, and you know what, even if they'd have just have made these 3 as a shot to say, okay, as a test, I'm glad they made 13. I'm glad they really went with it fully. But if they'd have just put these 3 out just to test the ground, I think that Doctor Who would have still have been a success, and I think that people would have still have latched onto it, and it would have still have been back, because all of the parts, all of the working parts are here. They're working, they're thriving, they're connecting with the audience. I think it's absolutely wonderful stuff, and I'm so pleased we set about watching these. So yes, series 1 of Doctor Who is available on both DVD and Blu-ray in a steelbook and standard packaging. You can also watch it on BritBox, I understand still, and Series 1 is currently up on the iPlayer. I think
it's on Sky as well, I think.
A limited
It's
view.
on Sky.
Is that right, Ian? It's definitely on
it's on
Sky as
Sky.
well.
Yep.
So there are multiple places that you can go back and rewatch not just The Unquiet Dead, but all of Series 1 too, if you wish, particularly in light of the fact that the man, the governor, the boss,
the man,
Russell
the myth, the
T
legend.
Davies. Yes, he's back in the room. The adults are back in the room. And all new Doctor Who with Russell T Davies is on the way. Thank you to everybody who's been watching along with us here on YouTube and Facebook. Yes, we've got a couple of people saying it is on HBO Max too in the States.
Wow, cool.
So yeah, we've got confirmation of that there. And that is the old girl starting up and calling time on this trip in the TARDIS. But I'll be back with another Type 40 soon. Look out for that. Wherever you found this, it could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40, type40.podbean.com, or on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, now on Podbay too. I've got us onto Podbay and Audible, so we're getting new podcatchers coming along, joining the Type 40 party, the Type 40's trip of a lifetime, almost by the week. You can find us on the Podbean app too, of course, and here on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform on the Spacebooks YouTube channel. You can still find us on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed, loaded up with all those other treats for your ears. If you'd like to get in touch and have your say, you can reach out to us on social media, Instagram or Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who, or you can email us, whether you think we've got it all right or all wrong, or you just want to comment or suggest things for future shows. Email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really, really brave, you can join us over on Facebook in the Type 40 Facebook group. 5 years going strong there. Lots and lots of companions and friends sharing both the new series and the classic series, and talking about the exciting things that may be coming in the future, and probably talking about the things they want to pop on their Christmas list. Yeah. So that's that wrapped up. Ian, where can people get in touch with you on social media and see what other things you're up to?
As I keep saying every week, I have a channel called the Rebecca Gull channel, which has my web series. Go and watch that. Just type in Rebecca Gull into YouTube and you'll find me. I'm on Twitter at Ian David Diaz, the Mega Geek. Well, it's just Ian David Diaz, actually, at Ian David Diaz. So, yeah, you can talk to me on there. I put up silly comments. That's about it, really. I have my show reel. You can watch my show reel on the Rebecca Gull channel as well. So, there you go. That's me.
How about you, Wendy? Where can people hear or see more of you?
Well, first of all, I just want to say definitely go check out Ian's web series because it's awesome. He didn't pay me to say that.
Exactly. You get money tomorrow.
Yeah. But I'm on every Saturday with PJ Maybe and our regular Scooby gang with Let's Talk Geeky. And we're on about 9 p.m. UK time. Just talking about lots of general pop culture, but mostly classic TV and sci-fi films and movies and things like that. I'm very privileged also to be involved with the Script Doctors through the Geek Insides channel, where we sort of have a bit of fun doing some script reads from various eras of Doctor Who and other sort of pop culture films and things like that. And hanging out
there with our starry-eyed girl Sarah Graham on there.
Oh, with the wonderful, beautiful starry-eyed girl as well, and so many other great people. They're a great bunch, and just made me feel very, very welcome, like a member of the family. So they're great. So, and lots of other wonderful YouTubers. I'm pop up here and there on different people's streams. Blue Bonnet Hoovy and I are having a chat about Dark Shadows lately. So that's been fun. So hopefully we'll do some more of those. And on Twitter, I'm at Wendology1 on Twitter, which is pretty much my main social media hub. So
There we are. Easy enough. You can find us all. You can catch up with me on Twitter or Instagram as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning and posting about whatever catches my eye, my imagination, or both in popular culture, inside and outside of the TARDIS. Yes, occasionally I do watch and talk about things other than Doctor Who. But thanks to everybody out there for listening and for watching. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40. But enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope you're enjoying the news. Keep speculating, get commenting. Comment, like, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. And we'll see you back here on the Spacebook YouTube channel soon. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.